Today I am here with Victoria Bowler, and we are talking all about teaching music tomorrow or whenever you are teaching next in your classroom. And today we are talking specifically about activities that have to do with ostinato. And as I was thinking about today's conversation and all the conversations that we've had in the past, I'm starting to realize that there are a lot of recurring themes when we get on here to chat with you guys, even in the short life that this podcast has had so far. Thinking about ostinato, thinking about how we take one activity and it can go as far as we want it to go. And ostinato is a really, really great pathway to do that. And so I have a feeling that today you and I are both going to be talking about different ways of making music. We're going to be talking about possible extensions, and we're probably going to be talking a little bit about student creativity. Am I right in that prediction?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So you surprised me. I grabbed a drink of water. Okay, so I'm just going to dive right on into it. So my activity is called Clouds. And this is an activity that I created based on the book by Thomas Locker, which I checked really quickly, and it's not on Epic Books, unfortunately, but it's called Cloud Dance. And again, that author is Thomas Locker. And he also has Water Dance, and I think there's one other kind of like earth type dance book. They're really beautiful books, very descriptive, gorgeous photos, have lots of descriptive language in them that lend themselves really nicely to movement. And so as I tend to talk about movement frequently, I'm going to be talking about it again today. I took a small melody from Kodai's 333, and I have been informed by my mentors, by my teachers, that it was Kodai's intention that those be used as tools in your classroom, however you choose to do so. And so I have been told over and over again that it is okay to add text to those and share them. So I'm going to do that today. I can look up the number and put it in the show notes. But it goes simply like this. Clouds of many shapes and clouds of many colors, all the clouds will drift and dance across the sky. Now let's talk about this just briefly, even though this isn't about the Ostinati. So this is a tricky little melody, even though it's just 16 beats, because do that ray is really hard. Even if you're just doing the echo phrase, everybody wants to start on me because that's what your ear kind of wants to do. So that's something that you might have to remediate if you choose to do this song. And then what's cool is it's a low la tonal center, even though it doesn't happen until the very, very end. So it's like, whoop, surprise ending. Okay, so let me sing it one more time. Clouds of many shapes and clouds of many colors, all the clouds will drift and dance across the sky. And this is something that I sing kind of just where it feels appropriate as I'm reading and sharing the book with my students, which again, can't recommend enough. It's beautiful. And then after that activity, we will brainstorm a bunch of different words describing clouds. So Victoria, what are some words you can think of? I should grab a piece of paper that describes clouds.
Fluffy.
Fluffy clouds. What else you got?
Gentle.
Gentle. What if the clouds were doing something? What kind of words would you use if the clouds were doing something? So I, in my song, saying, all the clouds will drift and dance across the sky. So I have drift and dance. Can you think of anything else that clouds might do? It's okay if you can't.
I think that they could glide.
Ooh, glide.
They could float.
They could float. Oh, look at you. Okay, so now this time I'm going to sing my song again, and I want you to do a circle clap and just say float. Float. And I'm going to try not to look at you and zoom. Right? Float. Here I go, clouds of many shapes and clouds of many colors. All the clouds will drift and dance across the sky. Wonderful. And we can take that one step further. And this time I want you to go float, float. Here you go. Clouds of many shapes and clouds of many colors. All the clouds will drift and and dance across the sky. Yeah, it's kind of funny. So with Zoom, I got like a little syncopation there. That's cool. All right, so so if we think about this, and I should take 2 steps back, as I often do when I'm thinking about this and sharing. If I were to do this activity in my classroom in kind of the middle, meaty part of a lesson, the opening sequence of my lesson would have included some sort of movement warm-up, okay? And that is because I'm going to turn this into a movement ostinato. So an ostinato being a repeated pattern, float over and over again is pretty ostinato-y as it gets, right? So something that I would do in the opening of my lesson would be, and it's like, I always go to this, but like the Ella Jenkins walk and a walk and a walk and a stop. So we would practice walk and a walk and a walk and a stop, or walk, 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 walk. I'm going to tiptoe, 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 tiptoe. So we have quarter notes, 8 notes, and now we have I'm going to float and a float and a float, and we get that longer duration. So we have this experience with shorter. That wasn't the best metered example, but I think you get the idea. So these shorter duration versus longer durations. So now that we've done that with float, we're actually going to float like clouds around the room. So we have the rhythmic duration, we have float, we have that movement, active music making, and we could stop right there. But if you wanted to do something a little bit different, we could also go drifting and they're dancing, drifting and they're dancing. Or you gave me fluffy and they're gentle, fluffy and they're gentle. And that could just be a repeated ostinati as well. And that has some more rhythmic interest in it because we have ta, ta, ti, 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 ta, ta, ti, 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 ti. We can put that rhythm in our feet as well, and layer them however it might see fit. So that's the first level. So you could have this, let's back up. The first level could just be float, just speaking, circle clapping, and then just, what did I say? Fluffy and they're gentle, fluffy and they're gentle. And you have the melody as well.
The actual song.
Yeah. So let's back up a second. So the fluffy and they're gentle, fluffy and they're gentle, fluffy and they're gentle, fluffy, gentle, right? So you want to figure out a nice way to end it. Okay, so that's where the ostinati shifts just for the ending.
Yeah.
So you have that. Then you have the float on the home note, float, float. So you can add that. You could also go fluffy and they're gentle, fluffy and they're gentle, fluff. Because I live for do. I live for that. Fluffy and they're gentle, fluffy, gentle. So we have speech and clapping. We have singing. And then we could also put it in our feet. And then you could even go to instruments. Right? So all of these layered ostinati, you can kind of pick and choose not only what mode of music making you want to do, you can choose how complicated you want it to be. You can ask students for input on the words that they're using. You could even break them up into different groups and have them come up with their own ostinati with the words, right? So blank and they're blank, right? And that's all they have to do. And then they can share out, move how they want to. So yeah, so we could start with just the float if it's like first grade. Right? They could totally sing this and do the float speech. They could totally sing this. You could sing it and they could be doing the rhythm in their feet. Totally. All the way up to probably like even 4th grade, doing some of that Lola based stuff and moving to whatever mode of music making works best for them. So that was a lot, but hopefully it made sense. Okay.
That is awesome. I love this. Okay. So we start with this low-law-based pentatone melody, and right away it's going to capture everyone's imagination because you've set the tone of this activity because of the tonality, right? Thinking about one of the other reoccurring themes of our conversations is like what's worthy of a performance sharing. And something like this is absolutely worth it. Even if I'm imagining like this book that I've just pulled up. I didn't recognize it when you were talking about it, but now I'm looking at the pictures and yes, I've definitely seen this before. Lots of great possibilities here. I'm thinking about for like a sharing or an informants or something like that. If this is even like your transition piece to get kids on and off stage, because you said that you're going to sing the song periodically throughout the book. So I'm imagining in a sharing setting, this is like the connecting piece between all of the other ensemble activities or games or whatever it is that you're sharing in between those pages. I can see so many possibilities with this.
Yeah, and what's cool about that idea is like if you think about it and you have, 4 or 5 different 4th grade classes that have to get on and off whatever performance or informal space you're using, it can look completely different. Like if one class is just doing speech and movement, if one class is doing instruments, if one class is doing their own improvisation, so it'll be like that same reoccurring like hook or chorus or just melody if you want, but everybody kind of has their own spin on it and they can see the different types of things that are happening in your classroom just with that one song.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Okay, thinking about this from an ostinato point of view, because I know, informants kind of stuff is not what we're talking about. You had some really important steps there. Mm-hmm. One of them was introducing the song first. And you could definitely introduce the ostinato first, but I think for this activity, introducing that song first is really cool. Again, just because it sets the tone of the rest of the activity. Because if you had started this just with the floating and the gentle thing, we probably wouldn't be as floating and as gentle with our bodies, right? Like it's not, second graders are not naturally very floating, gentle people, right? They're naturally like more stompy and active, right? So, so setting that is really good. I also noticed that with the float, you had me speak it first before I was just singing on the tonic the whole time. And I'm sure that is helpful for students as well, just to get the timing of it, because this is something that we'll talk about with mine as well. Actually, this like elongated sound, float, you have the circle clap in there that helps a lot. But those elongated sounds are actually rhythmically much harder for kids to do than something short and quick,
Yeah, because it's a regulation of energy, right? Yep. So like so the circle clap is going to help not only the voice do what it needs to do, but then, if you do this, if you just say to kids, okay, say float.
Right.
This gives them that vowel space. And then when they move to the movement, instead of just stomping, like you mentioned, they're going to automatically use their arms to show some of that space, right? And show some of that duration, show some of that energy that we want to think about with the longer notes. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so tell me this, Anne, because we've talked already about how many different directions this activity could go in. Give me some steps for readiness. Like, how would I know that like my kids would be ready for this before I just like push them off into the clouds?
Yeah. Nice. So I was actually just making notes as we were talking here about how I would break this down over a series of lessons, because I kind of just threw a lot of information at you guys. So this idea is lots of movement practice with different durations, like I talked about. So using that just, I'm gonna walk and a stop, and get kids ideas, have them show you different ways to move, all that type of stuff. So if you're using it movement specific, in terms of actually using an ostinati, I'm not going to throw the melody and all the ostinati at them in the first lesson, right? So if we're teaching the song by rote through the book, and they heard it a bunch of times while I'm reading the book, then we teach the song. And then maybe just that first day, it's just float, sitting and showing that. Then move that to float, whatever tonality, I don't remember.
Right.
Float. Okay. Then move that to movement. Then maybe move that to just a lola drone, mi, drone on the instruments. And then if they got all of that successfully, then maybe it's time to add in the layered. Or if you don't want to go all the way to the instruments, figure out where your ending point is going to be. Think about that final picture that you want to capture, and then work backwards, right? So think, okay, if they can do this with just the float, then they can move to the movement, they can move to the singing. Then maybe it's time to add in that next ostinati. So readiness happens, assessing readiness happens throughout. If you're sitting and they're having a lot of trouble with that float duration, then maybe we just need to do another song with an ostinati that has a half note circle clap and kind of like an elongated macro steady beat type thing, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah,
I love it. I love everything about this. And you and I don't talk about what activities we're showing up with. We just show up with a theme and we go. So you and I have a nice two-parter that someone could use. These activities are going to be really similar, which is very interesting.
I'm sorry.
No, I think this could be great because, oh my gosh, Anne, we're like creating this informants. We're co-creating this informants together because when people are done with your song and they get on stage, we can do a really easy transition to what I am talking about. And so now we've linked everything together. So if you need your spring informants, we've got you. We've got you right here. Okay. We are just swaying in place while you listen to our song. Who has seen the wind? Neither you nor I. When the leaves bow down their heads, the wind is passing by. Who has seen the wind? Neither I nor you. When the leaves bow down their heads, the wind is passing through. And what's our song about?
The wind.
It's about the wind. Yeah, it's about the wind. Great. This song, I don't know where I learned it. It's one of those songs that I think I've just always known. And then after a while, I've looked through every resource I have. I've scoured the internet, and then in the planning binder, I just ended up emailing Aileen Miracle and saying, "You have this on your blog. Can I cite your blog as my source for this song?" So Aileen is the source on this. I love this song. Okay, so now with some icons on the board, we are going to sing the song. Students can sing the song by themselves at this point. And as a B section, we are just going to do some echoing. And for our purposes, we'll turn our fingers into people and do it that way because I know you're sitting down. My turn. Whoosh, whisper, wind.
Whoosh, whisper, wind. Whoosh.
Whisper, 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 wind.
Whisper, whisper, whisper.
And you
wind.
stop. Beautiful. Yeah, I didn't clarify. If we were in person, that would be easier. I'm going to speak something, you echo. I speak something else, you echo. Whisper, whisper, wind.
Whisper, whisper, wind.
Whoosh, whisper, wind.
Whoosh, whisper, wind.
Wind, wind, whoosh.
Wind, wind, whoosh.
Whoosh, whisper, whisper.
Whoosh, whisper, whisper.
Who has seen the wind? And then we're back in place. Okay, so our next step after we've done our fingers as people, now will you turn your actual feet into your actual people, and we are moving around in open space. Open space is a concept that we would know by now, going back to your walk and a walk and a walk and a stop. We're looking for how to move around the room in this shared communal space that we have. So now, after we sing the song again, we'll repeat that same activity, but this time I will speak something and you echo with your whole body. So I might say, whisper, whisper, whoosh. And students would, as they're moving around the room, speak back. Go ahead.
Whisper, whisper, whoosh.
Great. And we are on that whoosh. You can't see my feet, but I'm doing a really big exaggerated slide. It's like my whole body is sliding as my foot is moving. Okay, so now we have some different icons on the board of wind, whoosh, whisper. And as you can guess, the next activity step is for students to come up to the board and they're moving the icons around, and students will lead this activity instead of me. So instead of me speaking the pattern and students echoing, a student will speak the pattern, the rest of the class echoes, etc., etc. And you can stay here for eternity, right? This is its own activity on its own, but it's not an ostinato yet. So after a while, I am going to ask students, I'm going to put on the board, whoosh, whisper, whisper, whoosh, whisper, whisper, and transition from that being a B section thing to kids starting it as the B section, and then they just keep going on their own. And as they are whooshing and whispering all around the room, then I will sing with my own tiptoes and slides, who has seen the wind? So I am doing one set of tiptoe slides that matches the rhythm of the song. Students are doing their whoosh, whisper, whisper around the room with each other. The nice thing about that pairing movement with an ostinato idea is that students are writing, they are notating the rhythm with their bodies as they move around the room. So even though things can get kind of squirrely when you add that movement piece into it, I actually find that kids have an easier time when they pair it with movement because they can see the other people around them. It's like they're reading each other's movements. So it's harder to get lost with an activity like that. So the progression is we're singing the song first. We have some echoing back and forth with movement, and then kids will just take one of those echoes and kids are moving the icons around and changing the order of these words, and then the B section just keeps going. And so students are speaking the ostinato, the teacher is singing the song. And then as you can imagine, the next steps can be to split the class in half, or like I'm tagging people to be on the song team and some people are still moving around, et cetera, et cetera. So this is another example of a really nice performance piece, maybe second grade-ish, depending on where you want to add in that elongated sound over 2 beats. But very similar, isn't it interesting? Like a very similar idea to yours.
Yeah, I love
it. And
I
picked this because I was like, Anne's going to do like a garden gate kind of thing. So I'm going to hit her with like the law pentatonic and like a half note and like movement, but no.
Okay, but that's a good point because I was thinking about this because we've talked a lot about how like I feel like early childhood is like my jam. I love K1, like I live there, and like you feel like your sweet spot's a little bit older.
Yep.
But the thing is that the repertoire drives your sequence. Just because you're using a low law based song doesn't mean it can't be used. And I know you know this. It can't be used
That's
for
a
younger
great
kids.
Point. That's
right?
a great point.
And so the idea is that like, yes, I'm doing something that is a low law based song, and it can be extended to instruments and using the tonal center stuff and talking about low law, tonal center, and all that stuff with older kids. But if I wanted to do this with kindergarten, there's nothing wrong with still having that float there and talking about how it's a big beat and they're still getting used to feeling these different longer versus shorter comparatives in their bodies, and just stopping there and just stopping with the movement activity and talking about different things that clouds do and exploring that in their bodies, right? Go.
Well, I was just the other thing that I would yes and on top of that about the garden gate thing is that when you're talking about your different clouds, like fluffy clouds, gray clouds, whatever, that's the exact same garden gate thing that we did whenever that was a couple weeks ago, right? But it's applied here and it feels so different, right? Just because of how you're using the material. But it's the exact same concept, just drag and dropped, kind of tweaked a little bit for this context.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to find repertoire like this that you can use in that way for those younger students. You know, if we just sang So Me all day long, we go bananas. So it's important to, you know, sing in all tonalities, all meters, all that kind of stuff, and then pull out what you can from those meaningful songs. And a good song is one that you could use throughout grades. I mean, you might go batty, but you could do these activities with all the grades all week. You know what I mean? You really could if you scaffolded it particularly for that curricular goal. So no, and I wanted to mention with your informants, you could still, and I know you know this, but like for those listening, like I'm imagining like, okay, then what's the next step? Because that's just always where my brain goes. Okay, so let's find something with unpitched percussion, even if we're not going to do Ostinati with tonalities. And if you need something with a longer duration, find a triangle, right? Like, so there's all these different ways that you can keep on going. And I think that that's really important. Or expand the form, right? There's always a way to keep things moving even bigger. So.
Yeah, and that the unpitched percussion tie-in is exactly what I do with this activity. Like, do you want a rhythm stick as whoosh? Well, no. I mean, maybe like if you drag it and make it like very artistic, right? But no, your finger cymbals are going to be a much better choice for that elongated sound. So yeah, this moves into some really nice unpitched percussion arranging and orchestration, instrumentation, and kind of experimentation like that. So yeah, a lot of different possibilities.
Yeah, and I think that this is too for those who, and I know we've already talked about some movement stuff, for those who might feel uncomfortable with movement. This is a really nice way to get started in your classroom because it's so, what's the word I'm looking for? Like it's just tied. It's like you said, you can derive what you're doing, right? So it's so inextricably tied to the rhythmic content that it doesn't feel like creative movement. And you can always give students like a scarf or something, you know, that makes them, especially with these two particular pieces, they lend themselves very nicely to that. Gosh, we're so in sync, Victoria. That was bananas.
I know. I tried to be different, and I was like convergent. Oh
we both had the same idea. We're like, we're gonna do something different, and then
okay, so I think just wrapping up, with this idea, you and I both paired a movement idea with a rhythm idea, and we both had like a speech component before there was a melodic component with the ostinato. And I think that's probably important to highlight with the sequencing of both of these. We feel rhythm in our bodies. We feel rhythm first. And ostinati are so challenging because you're doing something different than the other musicians in the room. But you all have to be feeling in your body that same pulse.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about learning readiness. So the learning readiness is steady beat, right? Like if your kids can sing or say something while they're also keeping a steady beat in different ways, then you know that they're ready to go to the next step, right? Where it's a different repeated pattern.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. Cool.
You have a resource coming out. This is on my list of things to do, but yours will be out before mine. You have a podcast that should be out by the time this comes out. Are you going into some of like the first steps, like before trying some of these things?
Yeah, so I have kind of 4 different categories that I think of Ostinati. I'm sure there's more than that. I know there's more than that, but just kind of ways to start conceptualizing it if it's something that you haven't used a ton in your classroom, and sort of using it as a pathway to different ends. So yeah, but that will be out by the time this is live.
Awesome. That'll be perfect. So people can listen. Yeah, so people can listen to that and then come listen and try some of these things.
Cool. Awesome.
Love it. Okay, Anne, this is a lot of fun.